Welcome everyone to the third episode of the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Ninja Show. My name is Heike, I will be your host, and today it's all about threat and vulnerability management. And I have Mark with me as my expert. So Mark, why don't you introduce yourself quickly?
Hello, so I'm Mark Thomas. I'm part of the Defender for Endpoint Customer Experience Engineering team, and I'm here to talk about TVM today.
That's wonderful. So if you think about threat and vulnerability management, Mark, how would you explain this to someone who is not very familiar yet with what that is?
Yep, so this is all around understanding your posture and exposure within your organization. So it gives you a way to track vulnerabilities, understand the software inventory that you have within your environment, but then also gives you ways to actually look at the risk that you have, ways to remediate those vulnerabilities and track those remediations, and I suppose just get you to a more secure state from a posture point of view.
To me, that sounds very complicated. It's like you say scores and all these kind of things. Help us. It's not that complicated. So why don't you show us a dashboard or like the dashboard that someone who takes care of vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in an enterprise on how they see these scores and how they would actually start tackling those vulnerabilities and misconfigurations.
The first place to start in really is the dashboard. So part of the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, we have the dashboard specifically for vulnerability management. First of all, you'll see some really good overview information here. So things like exposure score. This you want to keep as low as possible.
Okay. So is your score of a 41 out of 100, is that an meh score or is this a good score? So of course, this is our demo tenant, right? So it has a lot of data that we can actually show and present the technology. But what is that? Is it a good score? Is it a bad score?
So the lower the better. So
Okay.
if you can get the score as low, that means your exposure is low, and the amount of risk that you have within your environment is lower. So 41, it's probably not bad, but it could be better.
And then that little graph just right below, is this over the time? Or what's that showing us?
So this is a trend back in time. So we can see, over the last 30 days or so, this is the trend that we see. So we've seen some improvements. This is probably due to things like vulnerabilities being patched, just in general updating. But it could be that, yesterday was Patch Tuesday, for example, and this has spiked up. There's been new patches available, and these have to be pushed out within the organization.
And then I see there is a very specific CVE up there, very present. Luckily, you don't have any devices exposed to it, but what is that one up there and why is it there?
Yeah, so this is a good one. So normally we would see a few more maybe in a normal environment, but again, because this is a test environment, we see 0 devices here. But this is all around tracking of the Log4j vulnerability, and this would have been over the last few months a key focus for vulnerability management teams, trying to track where Log4j is in the environment and how they mitigate and patch that.
Okay, before I dive deeper into different other CVEs, what else is on the dashboard? Sorry, I started already asking all kind of questions once you actually introduced the dashboard.
So from the dashboard, we've got a few good insights. I mean, each of these graphs and areas we can dive into for the detail, and we can see here just with exposure, we can dive in to see how we can improve on that score. Like you've said, we have that good view into Log4j vulnerabilities, and this is something that we can see. We surface up things like the top security recommendations. So these are the key things to go off and focus on within the organization. These could be, patching certain vulnerabilities, or it could be certain configuration changes that we provide to you to go off and patch.
Let's talk about this a little bit because I think this is very important. It is a risk-based approach, and it helps with business prioritizations, right? So it depends a little bit, of course, on is this an actively used vulnerability right there out in the wild? Are people actually using the application, or is it just installed but not running in memory and nobody can actually exploit it? And how often, and all the, like, there's a lot of intelligence behind it on how we help prioritize. Is that correct?
Correct. We don't just want to dump a load of CVEs and vulnerabilities on you. This is all about giving you those insights to say, yeah, for this vulnerability, we know, it's out there. It's in automated pen testing tools or frameworks, and we know there's people actively using it out there. So they're the things that you want to concentrate on, and that's where we bring the severity up. And like you say, if there's a lot of that within your environment, that's going to have more of an impact than maybe something that's really hard to exploit. There's maybe only theoretical proof of concepts out there. And again, it's not in your environment. So we're going to give that a lot lower score.
I think these little icons also help understand what it is, right? So there's like a little bug, and then there is another little thingy, like a target icon. Can you talk about these two, please?
Yep. These are really good. These are what we call threat insights. There's probably some better examples, and maybe as we get into the weaknesses area, we can look at a few more of those. But these will give you the insights into these threats. So for this one specifically, we can see there's some publicly available information around this on how to exploit it. We may see other things here, so may have links out to other information on these threats. It also links into things like our threat analytics reports as well, so you can get a lot more information about this vulnerability and how it may be used or exploited. If you ever see breach insights, then this is something you really need to focus on, because this means that we have an active alert for this vulnerability being exploited. So this is something, if you are seeing this target, make sure you're looking into this one.
So that means an active alert in that tenant, in that organization, using that specific vulnerability.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So do you think, and I'm just asking, is it now the right time to have a quick look at threat analytics, or will you go there a little later?
We can go there later. So I think as we go into maybe deeper into the weaknesses, there may be some good examples there that will ping us out into threat analytics.
Good. Let's scroll down a little bit. There's more on this dashboard.
Yep. So the other key one is secure score. So this is, again, all around your posture, recommendations on how to improve that score within the environment. So you want to get the score better. So basically increase the score by turning on certain controls, turning on certain security controls, or those types of recommendations again. And this can cover more than just the endpoint. These could be other areas within secure score, such as Office 365 or within Azure AD as well.
So the more services someone is using, they will light up here as well.
Correct. Yeah. The more points you've got, the better on this one.
So here it is, the more points.
Yes.
So secure scores should be high and the risk scores should be low. That's important.
Yes.
Good. So then what else? What's there? Top
events. So these are the new vulnerabilities. This is kind of like a timeline of new events as we're seeing new vulnerabilities in the wild. This is kind of your timeline to just see the top events in the last 7 days.
Okay, so then if we scroll further down, we have exposure distribution and remediation activities. First of all, of course, what is it? And then how are we presenting or calculating it and providing that information to the tenant?
Yeah. So these exposure score gives you the indication of how exposed that device is. So for each device, we give that an exposure score. The more vulnerabilities or issues in security configurations that we see, the higher exposure that device will have. Ideally, you want to get that exposure and risk, again, down as low as possible. This helps you then to understand what exposure do we have across devices. We can see that the majority have a medium exposure. And again, that could be built up of vulnerabilities, configurations, those types of things that are required or need patching on these devices. And we can see a small amount, so 74 devices low. And then we've got 5 devices that are actually high exposure. And we can, again, dig into these. As with any of these graphs, we can dig in and get into the detail.
Why don't we stay right here at the device inventory for a second? And what is that about? So this is not all the devices that you have, and just the devices related to threat and vulnerability management, or how can I think about the device inventory?
From the view that we've just taken, as we've drilled into the graph, we can see here the exposure level is high. So we're only bringing back the context from the last graph. We could add those filters back in to see things like medium and low, but otherwise these are the devices that have a high exposure level.
So quickly out of the demo, I want to talk about, maybe we'll go back there shortly, but the technology that we use to actually discover vulnerabilities, it's very different to traditional vulnerability assessment tools. So I'm always very excited, like it's the EDR sensor that is picking up all the security related events as well as the threat and vulnerability management information, right? So it's not a scanner that runs, I don't know, once a week and then you have an old inventory. It's basically near real time understanding what's running, what's running on the endpoint. So it's a always current view and not an outdated inventory.
So you're totally right that everything we do is what we call continuous discovery. So we're always continually discovering what is happening on those devices and bringing those insights into the vulnerability management side. And like you say, we're constantly getting that information. So what we see is sometimes traditionally with other vulnerability management solutions is that is a snapshot in that point in time. Whereas with this, it is continually flowing into vulnerability management.
And also, an important part is like, for instance, we don't have, of course, any information about customers using some of their line of business applications. Like there is no vulnerability information out there for something that is not known outside the organization. But because we are on the endpoint and we are using the EDR sensor, we can tell if a line of business application is using a vulnerability, for instance, any plugin or add-on or whatever, and can still bring this up to the customer's attention to fix that.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of having both the vulnerability management data and the EDR data and kind of bringing those together. It's really powerful.
So talking about, you were just saying it, the EDR data and the TVM data. So we are also basically helping a security analyst that might not usually be the one taking care of threat and vulnerabilities in an organization, depending on, the size. Some people have a very dedicated team, but having the data visible in the security operations center will also help a security analyst to understand if there was a alert, a breach or something on a device, that it is related to something that is vulnerable on the endpoint. And it shows across the portal, wherever it's needed, that data is being integrated.
And I think what I see is as sometimes alerts or incidents are being investigated, it's always good to know the vulnerabilities that are there on a device. So as from maybe this view, as you're investigating a device, looking into the amount of exposure that device has, just being aware of what is on there from a vulnerability point of view as well. And sometimes that attack again may be using a specific vulnerability that is really useful in that investigation into that device or into that alert.
Okay, so back to the demo. So do you want to go from here, or do you want to first actually, we just talked about the dashboard, and of course you can see in the navigation there is then...
Yep. So I think if we go back to the dashboard, this is normally the good place to start. I think the security recommendations, I think this is the key bit to drill into really. Just again, this will surface up the key recommendations to start looking into, again, to help bring that exposure score down within the environment. So you can see here, we're going to order this by things like the number of exposed devices and things like the number of weaknesses as well. So we can see here already by pushing out this patch, or patches, we can get rid of these 113 weaknesses across these 1,000 devices. So just getting out this patch would really increase or decrease the exposure and increase the security. And what we can do is just go through these kind of one by one, really starting from the top, because these are the things that are going to have the most impact within the organization. As we drill into a recommendation, this is going to give you more details about things like the vulnerabilities that are in here. So these, across these 1,000 or so devices, these are the vulnerabilities that we see in here. And we can see there's a mix of high, medium, could be low, or even critical vulnerabilities that we're seeing on these devices. Again, we can keep drilling into this data to get more and more information. But for this, we can then actually get a little more information about the CVE as well. So this will give us the detail of the CVE, things like CVSS scores that we have, any related software. And like we saw in the threat insights, we get a lot more of that detail here as well. So we'll know if it's publicly available, if there's things like exploit kits available, and sometimes references as well out to blogs and those types of things.
So then if you would like to remediate that vulnerability now, what could be your options here?
So from here, we can select the request for remediation. And this will give us like a workflow or a wizard to request the remediation for these devices. There's a few different things that we can do here. So we can recommend the software update. So for this, we're going to probably update because it's a server operating system. If it was something like a line of business application or some application within the environment, it may be that we want to actually uninstall that product. It may be that it shouldn't be allowed within the environment, and the recommendation would be to actually uninstall it and remove it. But for this, we'll probably want to update. We do have an integration with MEM as well, so Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which then opens up tickets in the MEM side, which IT teams can then go off and patch those endpoints.
So that means those tickets, there's like a security task created in Endpoint Manager with all the context that we provide through that integration. So what are the devices? What's the CVE, or all these kind of information?
We don't give things like CV details, because what we found is actually the IT teams just need to know, what devices to patch and what patch to actually give them. So we found that we don't really need to give the CV information, that they get the core information about what needs to be patched, also by a due date as well. So the vulnerability management teams may say, we've got 30 days to patch this to stay compliant, and that's what they may give this. So that's what the IT admin will see as well.
Beautiful. And then the good thing here again is that we don't need to wait for IT to actually come back to us and tell us it has been fixed. So basically part of that solution, because we are on the endpoint and we have our continuous monitoring, we will see if that thing was remediated as requested by us, right? So exactly.
Correct. So these are the remediation activities that have been created, and we can see we've got a few different things here for different things. These could be remediations for turning on certain security controls, like attack surface reduction, but it could be things like updating as well to remove vulnerabilities. And we can see here these are in progress still, and we can start to see how many of those devices have remediated or been remediated. So this is a great way to actually track.
The blue bar shows us the progress. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. So we can start to see, for this example, 559 of those 1,000 devices have received that patch or that configuration change.
And I can see this is not just Windows or Microsoft applications. This is a lot of different third-party applications as well. So our solution is not just looking at vulnerabilities and misconfigurations for Microsoft products. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're covering obviously Microsoft products, but then third-party software and other operating systems as well. So Linux, Mac, we've got support for, and again, applications that are on those. So it's not just Microsoft.
Good. What else? We looked into the inventory. We looked into all the recommendations. Is there anything in the recommendations, because we went from there to remediating? Anything else you wanted to highlight?
I think the key thing to highlight is just the recommendations do kind of span a few different areas. So there's the updates, so recommending these vulnerabilities should be patched. We've got things like security controls. So this is turning on things like tamper protection. We can see the devices that maybe don't have tamper protection enabled and give you a recommendation to say it probably should be turned on these devices. We've got things like controls that are just in the operating systems as well. So maybe configurations that, again, are just recommended to be on. We can give you those recommendations, again, to get you into a more secure state on those. And you can see things like firewalls, also things like application settings as well. Again, this covers more than just Internet Explorer. That could be things like Chrome application settings as well.
And the process of asking or requesting a configuration change is then the same as requesting a patch?
Correct. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Good. So what else do we have? Show me in the navigation.
Recommendations. We kind of covered remediation to a point. I'll just quickly go over it again, but this is where you can track those remediations. As we're going from recommendations, we can then see all the remediations, keep track of those, and see where they're at. Just keep an eye on where we are with remediating it. These either controls or updates. The next key thing really that we see used is then the software inventory, and this is giving you the inventory of software installed across the environment. Again, this could be operating systems, like you can see here, Linux, Ubuntu, Windows, or it could be software inventory about actually what software is or applications are installed on these. So this is a great way to just get an all-up view of what applications you have out within that environment.
And it shows again, if in your organization that specific application has a vulnerability, if it's exploited in the wild, and all these important information to make a decision for you, like for you to make a decision on what to fix. Is this alphabetically? Is this prioritized? How is that software inventory listed?
So again, this is normally done by the amount of exposed devices. So you can kind of sort and filter this however you want. So if you wanted to order by weaknesses, it may be something that you want to do. But generally, it's the number of exposed devices. So we can, again, see here, we've got a lot of Windows Server that needs updating. And then the next one would be .NET, so 380 devices. So things like highest impact, number of devices, and we can view this in different ways.
And because we are right now in the threat and vulnerability management context, it's all based on risk and impact and lowering the risk score and raising the secure score.
Yep, correct. Yep.
Making it, yes.
Yeah, low risk, increased security.
Yes. Good. So we talked about discovering of the vulnerabilities and the misconfigurations, how to remediate them. Do we want to drill down into one specific CVE, and you pick one and then show us a little bit? You were saying there's more icons and maybe reports that we provide and a few more details that can be helpful.
I suppose for this one, we can see something like better threat insights on this. I'll just drill in. I'm not too sure what the CV is, but let's see. So if we go into the software page, you can do this kind of for all the software that we see. So this will give you a view into the software, the vulnerabilities that we see there, things like version distribution as well. So if it is something like OMI or even Google Chrome or Edge, we'll give you the version distribution, things like the installed devices that are out, and then things like the discovered vulnerabilities. For this one, we can see there is a critical vulnerability, and then we can drill again down into this. So for this one, we can see again that there is a public exploit available, or it's publicly known. It may not be in exploit kits, but what we can do is start going out to some of these sources. Things like MVD is kind of the vulnerability database source that's going to give you a lot more information. It normally links out to things like blogs and security research as well on these CVEs. And we got references here as well. So if there is a reference, we'll detail it in this section. And again, this will give you a lot more information about that. And just to show you again the version distribution, this will give you an idea of what versions are installed on there. So again, it may be that you're focusing on certain versions, or you need to know which ones to patch above to make sure these are mitigated.
So basically a view of that specific software distributed in your organization, how many endpoints, but then also different versions and all the details you need to know for a specific software.
Yep.
Okay, Mark. So now that we looked into one specific vulnerability, is there a way to see a little bit more about what are all the CVEs out there? A database or an inventory? I don't want to call it an inventory because nobody wants to collect them, but what do we know about things out there?
Yep. So we have the weaknesses page. This will give you a list of all the weaknesses that we have. By default, we filter this by affects your organization or affects my organization, just to give you the view for your organization. But if you wanted to, and you're interested in CVs that maybe aren't within your environment, you can remove this filter. And this will give you that ability to search all CVs that we have in vulnerability management. You've also got the option here to search through those as well. So if you know of a certain CV that you want to be tracking, this is where you can come and look into that CVE.
Okay, so basically the weaknesses page turns into a summary or repository of all the CVEs and weaknesses that could be. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So we talked about it on the dashboard that there is that little icon, or like there's more little icons, but that specific one that brings people to even more details about a specific CVE. So if someone wants to learn more about, I don't know, Log4j or any other vulnerability, where can they go to learn more?
Within some of these CVs, you'll see links out into threat analytics, and you'll sometimes get that on the threat insights. This will basically bring you out into our threat analytics area. Within here, we have a lot of good reports of things like Log4j, but you will see other coverage of other CVEs as well and vulnerabilities within threat analytics.
So in threat analytics gives you, of course, a summary, a detailed summary actually, about what that specific CVE is, what is the attack stages or like the kill chain or whatever people want to call it. It gives you a threat to posture view. It shows you exactly that specific vulnerability to your organization. Do you have any alerts? Do you have devices that need to be mitigated, and all these details? Who is writing these? Who is bringing all that intelligence together?
Yes, so this is written by or backed up by our researchers. So we have our security research teams feeding into these. So obviously tracking campaigns, tracking high profile threats, and creating the information in there. So like you say, really a good high level summary, but then also detailed summaries as well if you want to go into that. Also things like queries, advanced hunting queries that you can use. And I think the key bit here for vulnerability management is the mitigations that can be applied, because this will actually link nicely into the security recommendations that we give as well. So things like maybe turn on these attack surface reduction rules, turn on tamper protection. These types of things will help mitigate against some of these things.
So, Mark, we talked a lot. We covered the dashboard, we covered the recommendations and the weaknesses and the remediation options and all the little icons and extra information that people can get out of our threat and vulnerability management solution, part of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Is there anything else that I forgot to ask that you would like to highlight that you think is important for our audience to know?
I think the key thing is really this is all accessible. Everything within the vulnerability management area is accessible via the advanced hunting side of things. So you can write those queries if you're looking for specific things within the organization. Again, linking software, vulnerability management information, weaknesses, those types of things, linking that all together in queries. And you've also got a whole host of APIs to use as well. So if you want to create your own Power BI dashboards, take this data out, pump it into other vulnerability management tools and views, things like ticketing systems as well. This is all possible via the API, which is really, really, really cool.
Okay, Mark. Oh, wow. Yes, that's actually almost a good closing statement, but I totally forgot about advanced hunting, how powerful it is to really get data from different sources, such as logged on users correlated with threat and vulnerability management data. Yeah. So the last part, Mark, we had an announcement last week, and I would love for you to explain a little bit what that was about when it comes to threat and vulnerability management.
Yeah, we definitely had an exciting announcement in the Defender for Vulnerability Management area. So there was a rebranding that's happened. So we've moved from the TVM name to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. So this is kind of the new name for TVM. And a big part of this is we've released a premium add-on SKU or license, which aims to give you more additional functionality on top of what you already have within TVM. Things like certificate assessments, being able to see the certificates that are there within the organization. Look into things like browser extensions as well. So across things like Chrome, Firefox, Edge, being able to understand what extensions are installed there and get more information and views on that. And I think one of the features to highlight is also then the compliance area. So compliance checking that we'll have. So checking these devices that are out there and onboarded for compliance against things like industry standard CIS benchmarks, looking into where a device is compliant, where do we have these settings, and being able to report on that. So yeah, this is the kind of start of Premium, and it's a really exciting announcement.
We will put definitely a link to the announcement blog in our chat window. So Mark, I think we covered a lot. I want to really thank you for being my expert for today's episode, all about threat and vulnerability management. Thank you so much for being today on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And to everyone, thanks for attending, thanks for watching, and don't forget to sign up for our next episode, which is episode number 4, and we will talk about attack surface reduction. And I will have another expert joining me. Stay tuned, and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you, everyone.